أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات سورة المباركة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والحمد لله الذي جعلني من أمتي سيد المرسلين خاتم النبيين طه وياسين أحمد محمود أبو القاسم محمد. ومن المحبين عترة الطاهرين لعنة الدائمين من الآن إلى يوم الدين على أعدائهم. أما بعد، قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم. صلوات. I know it's been a long evening, and inshallah I will try and be as brief, but the subject today is one of extreme importance, and I crave your attention. It's a subject which talks about the value of insan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that we have created insan in the best of forms, the best of modes. And that gives us a special stature amongst all creation. And I talked about this a few days ago, that we share certain faculties with the animals, and one, the angelic faculty of aql, with the angels. And indeed, our young friend spoke about the idea of thinking and making something out of yourself through your thoughts and through your actions. As we Jaffarya, every individual, as I said yesterday, society, and every society is responsible for the individuals in that society. A society where there are more people who are willing to volunteer, there are more people who are willing to give, and less people who are willing to take, is a society that progresses. Where there is a society where there are more people who take and less people who want to volunteer or give, that society stagnates. And as we sit on this first Shaza to commemorate the martyrdom of Sayyidul Shuhada, we are part of the Husseini University, which has begun from Sham. This indeed is a legacy of Bibi Zainab Salamullahi alayha, and each one of us owes it to Bibi Zainab Salamullahi alayha to ensure that our Imam Bargas, our centers, which are our Hussein universities, continue to function, make sure that the lights remain on, make sure that these things are maintained. We make sure that these become the institutes of education and nurturing of the next generation. Mu'mineen, this is very, very important to understand. It is not another ritual that you will take of a lecture, you will go home and you are done with it to say that I have gained the thawab. Of course you will. It's for Allah to reward us whatever He feels fit. But we have to make sure that it is we who will make this center what it is. Everyone's input is important. Everyone's input needs to be considered important. Every society has different views, and I said something a few days ago, that Mu'mineen, we may have different horizons, but we all live under the same. And this indeed, the sky that is sheltering us is the sky of rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So, Mu'minin, this particular ayah actually gives a value proposition. You know, the corporate world and the marketing world, what's the value proposition of your project? You know, what is it? What am I going to get out of it? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the value proposition of a human being in Surah Tin to say that we have created you, we have created insan in the best of molds. A mold is formed, and then you pour some essence into it, and finally the final shape comes out. So the potential of a human being to be the best of the best is there. But if you are going to then share and be guided by animalistic tendencies of quwa ghadabiyya and quwa shahawiyya, then we can go lower than the animals. That is a form that will come out. But if you allow our aql to control the other faculties that we have, and we will talk about that in this particular presentation, then inshallah we will come out as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended to be. Because Allah is proud of us. Allah is proud of His one to succeed. It is now for us as to what we are going to do. Imam Muhammad Baqir al-Islam said, and I quote, that Allah has bestowed upon the believer three qualities. Number one, honor in this world and in the hereafter, salvation in both the worlds, and fear of Him in the hereafter. Yazid was frightened of Imam. That is why he was demanding that bay'ah. The idea of fear of the oppressors for those who speak the truth. Salawat. So, Mu'mineen, the subject here is one of making sure that we understand who we are, and we talk about ourselves. Now, there are two terms that I want to clarify, especially for my young friends. There is what they call self-esteem. These two sometimes are used interchangeably to say he has self-esteem or he has no self-worth, she has self-esteem or she has self-worth. But the two things are quite different. Self-esteem is how you feel about your own self. That's self-esteem. It's your perception of how you're doing. And you know, your perception of how you're doing in the world is not formed by you alone. It is formed by what people of grades that you get in school. It's what your professor. It's what your colleagues may say about you. So self-esteem is something that can go up or down, depending on the that you're in. You get a grade in a test, you feel great, your self-esteem goes up. If you flunk the test, the self-esteem goes down. Something that is relative, changeable, and self-worth is something that you're born with. This is God-given faculty. This is your God-given gift. Creation of the universe. You are worthwhile and you have value that cannot be taken. No one can take away that value as insan. You can't lose it. You can't lose it. You might actually lose sight of it sometimes. But inside there is always that level of self-worth. Never, never underestimate your value or forget your value. And this is where, you know, you raise yourself where Allah might baland itna. इतना खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तक पहले बंदे से पूछे बता तेरी राह. It is that before making what to be to a stage where Allah actually, oh my creature, you know, there are levels contented. It is what we call nafs mutma'inna. That this is a contented soul, nafs mutma'inna. You then have the next level of nafs radhiya, where you are pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you have the soul which is called nafs mardhiya, where Allah is pleased with you. This is a level of a human being that from nafs mutma'inna you go towards many stages of nufus, but it is the state of the Aimma alayhimus salam to be at the level of nafs radhiya, and they move on to nafs mardhiya. At least for us, it is merely to emulate, to say, how far is it that we can get? And indeed, the epitome, the height of a human being's value is in Surah Al-Najm to say, وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. The destination. Our brother talked about, Jannat and Jahannam, talked about the potential. Well, the sublime vision of the human potential, our destiny and our relationship with God is a vision of destiny which exalts us, because Allah says, towards God is your limit. Can we understand as to where a human being can go? And we can see the Aimma alayhimus salam to be at that level to say that your limit is towards God. Not just the direction, the limit, that this is the height of your value, this is your self-worth. And we should never forget, we should never be so influenced by the society around us that they give us complexes which may be inferiority complex, to say that my self-esteem is low. Your self-esteem doesn't matter. Your self-worth, which is inside you, is what really matters. Salawat. And where did this come from? Where did this come from? This came from the most liberating of messages that humanity has ever known. It is the message of La ilaha illallah. It is the message of La ilaha illallah. There was a paradigm shift. When the Blessed Prophet brings this message of La ilaha illallah, it is a continuation of the monotheistic message from Nabi Adam to Nabi Ibrahim and all the prophets after that, Nabi Musa, Nabi Isa, and the Blessed Prophet. It is a continuation, but never was it more explicit when the Blessed Prophet said, La ilaha illallah, Kulu la ilaha illallah tuflihu. This is what elevates us to a level to say that a person had no other value because of his tribe, because of his color, because of his ethnicity. What really mattered was the God cognizance and the taqwa a person had. This was the level that we were taken. So it deflated the value of blood, tribe, race, which in pre-Islamic days was predominant and of significance, and it brought their value to zero. And this is how people perceived it. Hazrat Bilal was being beaten by his masters. When he said, La ilaha illallah, they said, they were beating him up to say, why did you accept this message? And all he could say was, while he was being beaten in the hot sun there, lying on the ground, on the stony ground, and he had the courage to keep saying Ahad. Every time he was beaten, he would say Ahad. This was his self-worth that Hazrat Bilal understood. When the parents of Ammar, Yasir and Sumayya, when they see the idol dropping from the mantelpiece and breaking, they understood the liberating message to say that an idol that falls and breaks can do nothing for me. There must be another deity, there must be a creator, and they truly imbibed the message of La ilaha illallah. For that, again, they were the first shaheeds of Islam. They were the first shaheeds of Islam, that they were killed because of their belief in La ilaha illallah. Salawat. All this that we have been given, mu'mineen, is the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Somebody comes to Imam Raza alayhi salam. And the previous prophets had various miracles. Nabi Musa's miracle, Nabi Isa's miracle. People were used to having miracles. And they said, why is it that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not showing any miracles? So somebody came and said, how can you accept that the prophet, to be the prophet of God, when he shows no miracles? And the answer that Imam Raza gives is something that we should ponder upon. He refers to the greatest miracle of Allah, he says, is the human mind. The greatest miracle. It allows ideas to be taught through, reasoned out, and Islam appeals to human reason. Man must accept God through reason and not through miracles. This is the legacy of the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. The nafs that we have is truly an undeveloped kingdom. It's an undeveloped kingdom, and the faculties within us are ones which are ambassadors in this kingdom, where we say that he inspired the nafs, فَهَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَهَا. That he inspired it, the nafs, to understand what is right and what is wrong. We are given this faculty to choose between right and wrong. This is granted to every human being, and indeed, the highest degree of wisdom, as we understand, is self-awareness. If you're not aware of your own self, then the degree of wisdom is much lower. You can be aware of what's happening around you. You can be aware of what CNN is telling you. You can be aware of what Fox may be telling you, the propaganda. But if you are not aware of your own self, there will never be wisdom. You will be influenced by X, Y, and Z, whichever the way the wind blows. Today I have one opinion, tomorrow I may have another opinion, because I am not self-aware. And to be self-aware, one needs to have a level of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is something that is being talked about today in the corporate world, to say, well, you must have, in order to run a successful team, you must have emotional intelligence. Well, we were told by the Imam alayhi salam to say that self-awareness, one who has recognized his nafs has recognized, one who has recognized his self has recognized his Rabb. The idea of that self-awareness, and there is a science that is developing which is called the neuropsychology of learning. And if anybody is interested, and we are trying to develop this science within the community, within our madrasas, to make sure that our teachers are aware of how do you create that cognizance in the students that they teach. The teaching model today has changed. I'll just give you a small glimpse of what does this mean. That within the Islamic philosophy, what you have philosophy and you have ethics. These are the two main things that we look at when we look at the corpus of Islamic knowledge. What is philosophy? And please bear with me, because not many times that we have actually these things being discussed from the pulpit. And if we do not use this pulpit to actually make aware of the mu'mineen of the potential that we have, then we have not given due right to this mimbar and to this pulpit. So please bear with me. Philosophy means contemplation towards human perfection for the qurba of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what is called In our learned friends here will bear me out to say that this is what they call speculative wisdom, which is al-hikmat-e-nadariya. This is speculative wisdom that we have. Then you have ethics, which is a movement from evil to habit of good traits and towards virtuous behavior. And this is called al-hikmatul amaliya, the idea of action. Remember we talked about it, and this is all being connected, of faith and deeds. Faith comes through the idea of speculative wisdom, and the correct deeds come through practical wisdom. So you have this philosophy and ethics. Otherwise, people don't give enough attention to philosophy sometimes. And philosophers tend to live in their own ivory towers. A philosopher once got very tired, and he said, I have to rest my mind. I've been thinking all day, all week, all month. So he goes for a ride in a boat. And as they go through, the philosopher is asking the boatman that, have you ever studied philosophy? And he said, no, I haven't studied philosophy. So the philosopher says, you have lost half your life if you have not studied philosophy. As they were moving forward in the ocean, suddenly there was waves in the ocean, and the boatman is asking the philosopher to say that, do you know how to swim? Have you studied swimming? And he said, no. He said, then your whole life is wasted. The idea of having the wisdom through speculation, speculative wisdom and deeds are both part and parcel. You cannot just remain in ivory towers and just think about things. Society has to give its dues. Otherwise, it is like saying, and we said that we do not believe in the idea of somebody going up in a mountain and meditating and doing nothing, because if that is the case, then it's like someone saying that I never got a parking ticket. Why didn't you get a parking ticket? You must be a very good driver. Well, I don't drive. Well, if you don't drive, you'll not get a parking ticket. You live in a society. You are distracted by all the distractions that come through. And despite the distractions that you have, that you actually go on a path, that you are a man with a mission, that this is the path that has been carved out for you. That is the meaning of living as per the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So, at the time of creation, we say the soul is like a clean tablet, devoid of all traits, good or evil. And as we progress through life, we develop the faculties which are inbuilt in us to say which of the faculties are going to be stronger in us. There are some natural traits. Like if you normally write with your right hand, that is your natural trait. But God forbid, if your right hand was cut off or did not work, you would be forced to write with your left hand. That is what we call learned behavior. A human being has the potential to have the learned behavior. There are people who have a natural inclination to be perhaps in some ways little quiet. They are introverts, or they are inclined towards introversion. There are some who are inclined towards extroversion. In a society which requires you to be an extrovert, you can learn the behavior. This is how the human mind can condition itself. But we come out with a tablet which is clean, and when we develop these faculties, and if you understand where my shortcomings are, what is it that I'm not so good at, that you work hard at it so that you are able to develop that learned behavior, and understanding that and applying that is truly the science of what we call emotional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence? It's a combination of philosophy and ethics. On the one hand, you have what you call personal competencies. Knowing your internal state, your preferences, your resources, your intuitions. This is what you are made up of. And then you also have your actions, meaning how do you manage yourself? How do you manage others? How do you manage your impulses? And then you have your social competencies. How do you act in a society? These things are important for us to understand, be it in an organization, be it in a family, be it in a gathering of this nature. Every person has their traits, and if we understand each other's traits, then we can have a better team, we can create a better community, we can create better cohesion, because social awareness means that you are aware of others' feelings. You may say some words which may be very hurtful. Trump was recently asked, I saw this email coming to me, and a student from Harvard was asking him a question. And he immediately jumps to the conclusion to say, are you from Korea? I don't know if anybody has seen that. Say, are you from Korea? He said, no, I was born in Texas and I grew up in Colorado. That's the answer he gives. The idea is you could see the inherent racism that came through Trump, because the fact he sees a face that looks like an Eastern face, he immediately jumps to the conclusion that, are you a Korean? Now, he was not emotionally intelligent to actually think that this boy who is asking me a question is an American. And the idea of not accepting that anybody who is not Anglo-Saxon and white cannot be American is something that came through because he was emotionally unintelligent. One wonders, when you look at his poll numbers, to see how emotionally intelligent some of his followers are. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that we need to understand that how do you adapt? How do you adapt so that you are able to give desirable responses to the other person? Mu'minin, this is what makes societies. They just don't happen. Some people are extremely good at their PR. Some people are extremely good at doing certain things. That's a natural behavior. That doesn't mean that we cannot have a learned behavior. It all comes back to the fact that if you have that inbuilt capabilities, you need to recognize it, and then you need to actually act on it. Salawat. What the corporate world is talking about today has been talked about by the teachers of Islamic ethics for centuries. Sayyid Naraki, in his great book, Jami'u Saada, talks about these things. And we never discuss these things. Generally, it is left for the houses to discuss this. It has to be that every young man and woman in our community must be aware of the work of Ustad Naraki to say, how do I develop my faculties? And if we do not introduce these things to our young people at a level when they're understanding this, then they have little connection, because what they see is within the corporate world, they see all these great corporate principles. Islam has so many answers for you, my young friends. You have the power of intelligence, which is your Quwwah Aqliya, which is your angelic faculty. The power of anger, your Quwwah Ghadabiyya, which is your faculty of being ferocious to protect yourself. The power of desire, in order to procreate, in order to exist, you have to have the power of desire. Allah has given it to you. And there is a fourth one that Ustad Naraki talks about. And he talks about Quwwah Wahmiya, which is actually the power of imagination. No great painting would be made, no great work of art would be done, no great building would be built unless the human being, a donkey cannot design a great building. The human being can, because he has been given the Quwwah Wahmiya, the power of imagination as to what can be. Now, the whole idea is that if you have the power of intelligence, which keeps a check on the other faculties and controls the other faculties, then you operate as a balanced human being. And when you have a society where you have balanced human beings, then that entire society becomes a balanced human society, which is what we call Ummat Wasata. Salawat. And it's very easy to remember this. With this metaphor that I'm going to give you, this is not difficult. Imagine that you have a mounted traveler on a horse, and he has a dog, and he's traveling with a spy with him. Four items: the rider, the horse, the dog, and the spy. If you remember this metaphor, then you will be able to see and understand the idea of the four kuwas that we are talking about. The mounted traveler, the rider, represents aql. The dog represents your kuwa ghadabiya, the ferocious power to protect you. The mount, the horse, actually represents your kuwa shahawiya, which is your power of passion. And the spy that you have with you represents your imaginative power. Now, if you're riding, you need the dog to protect you from enemies. But you know, if that dog barks at the wrong time, he'll draw your friends away. So you have to control the dog enough so that it is ferocious enough when you need protection, but you are also making sure that the dog does not go over in the idea of this balance. Ustad Naraki says that every faculty has its balance, every faculty has its excess and a deficiency. This is a whole lecture. I'm just giving you something that you can go and Google. My friends, go and read this book. It's available in al-islam.org, al-islam.org. You have this book by Naraki, translated into English. It is a wonderful book to try and understand your own self. Now, the spy represents the imaginative power. The spy is giving you intelligence from wherever to make your journey safe. But you know, if the spy gives you the wrong information, where there are no weapons of mass destruction, you go in and then become a fool and destabilize the rest of the world. When you get wrong intelligence, then you have to have the aql to ensure that the intelligence that's being given to me is wrong. This is your power of imagination. And finally, the actual horse, which is the most important thing that you need to control, is your power of passion. If you allow the horse to take you wherever, it'll take you on the wrong path. But if you control the horse, if you control your power of passion, if you control your kuwa shahawiya properly, that you will use it where it is allowed to use and not use it where you're not allowed, you control the horse, then your journey will be safe and you'll be able to go to the destination safely and soundly. If you allow the horse to take over, you don't know where you'll end up. If you allow the dog to take over, then you'll make so many enemies on the way that you'll be in big trouble. And if you allow your power of imagination, the spy, to give you wrong information, then you will be totally misguided. The idea is aql is the one that reigns supreme. Salawat. So, Mu'minin, the whole idea is that we think, and we think enough so we can think for a change, and that we are able to change our behavior. I'm in the business of teaching financial literacy. And I'll give you an example as to how you can change behavior. You know, people have knowledge to say, well, you should budget yourself. You should not spend more money than you earn. You should not be using credit cards just to borrow the money. Everybody has that knowledge. But you cannot change behavior until you start making people think. So what we do is we give them an example to say, okay, you want to buy a pair of Nikes. It's going to cost $80. $80 for that pair of Nikes that you want to buy. Now, what is it that you earn in an hour? Well, I earn $20 an hour. No, you don't earn $20 an hour. You actually earn $15 because after in your transport and everything else, and then you are earning only $15 an hour. So, if you're going to spend 5 hours of your life to try and have a pair of Nikes, have your priority. Do you want to spend that time with your family? Do you want to spend that time for leisure? Or do you want to spend time working so that you can buy that extra pair of Nikes that you don't really need? Once the penny drops, to say, this is how I understand my finances, to say I have to work for 6 hours to get this, you realize the value of it, and then you make a decision based on that. This is how, Mu'mineen, we can actually change knowledge, and this is how prophets and great leaders have used human psychology to actually change behavior. And I'll give you a practical example as to how we can change behavior. I said this a couple of days ago. I have said Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to the Mu'mineen here. That means that now my behavior must be such that if I have said peace be upon you, my behavior must be such that there must be peace to the person. That person cannot now expect me to have anything that is damaging to them. If I have truly understood. The idea of making that salam is no longer a ritual. I've said Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. I must mean it. I must mean it from my heart to say that I cannot now do anything to this person. And when you respond to me to say alaikum salam, peace be upon you too, then I expect that there'll be no harm coming to you from you to me. And when two people have said salamun alaikum to each other, and this is what we do, then if we truly want to change our behavior, if I have thought it through and I thought it correctly, then there can be no tension, not even creative tension between mu'mineen. Because yes, we may have a disagreement on some issue, but there will be no harm that will come to each other, and this is how mu'mineen will change behavior. I'll give you another example. I start everything that I want to do, and we are told you start something with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Everything that I start in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Well, have I ever paused to think even for a minute that a job or a day or a task that I have started in the name of Allah, said I'm starting this in the name of Allah, can there be a possibility that now I will disobey Allah if I've done it in His name? If I have truly imbibed that spirit of Bismillah inside me. It's not that somebody else is going to come and change you. Unless we actually think through every act that we do. Everything that we say and we do, if we imbibe that into us and say, yes, I have said Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Otherwise, if I were to tell you that there is this thief who says, I'm going to go rob somebody, but because it is now recommended that I start everything with Bismillah, then I will say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and go and rob somebody. That seems ludicrous. But isn't that what we do? That we begin the day with our Fajr prayers. We have said Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We go out of the house, we make all these du'as. And then are we cognizant that the dua that we made and the Bismillah that I said, am I keeping within that? That mu'mineen is the idea of changing that behavior. Salawat. Inshallah, we will continue with the topic. I will just introduce this and then move on because it has been a long night and I don't want to keep the mu'mineen too long. But, we are told adopt the akhlaq of Allah. I talked about this a couple of days ago. Taqallaku bi akhlaq Allah. The idea is adopt the akhlaq of Allah. What does it mean? That the Asma'ul Husna that we have must reflect in our lives. And I'll give you one example. When we say that each name to us is a dua. We recite this 100 times, 200 times, the Asma'ul Husna, and say this is dua. The idea is it is also supposed to change us. If one of the Asma is Adl, then I have to adopt that akhlaq of Allah of Adl in me too. That I must be just with myself, and I must also be just with the people around me. So that, I have truly given respect to Asma'ul Husna, and this is where we need to discover the attributes of Allah, we need to study them, and we need to live by them. It's not just going to come, without any effort. But we have to do it if we're going to make a change in behavior. We say, well, the society today is such and such. There's so many distractions. The society is not good. We must improve. We must do this. And we sit and talk about it, where we have to also act. We have to take it within ourselves, mu'mineen. And I'll just give you one, that one of his, and I'll talk about the theoastics and all that tomorrow, inshallah. I'm jumping over this. But one of the names of Allah is Al-Halim, that He is the forbearing one. What does that mean? He has the knowledge to see what happens. He has the wisdom to control that which makes you angry, and he can be justifiably angry, and he could justifiably take revenge if you do something wrong. But he does not. He is the one who witnesses the disobedience of the person who creates that disobedience. He is the one who sees the violation of his amr, but anger does not cause him or rouse him. He is not the one who is prompted to take a swift revenge. We are told that if you commit a sin, The angel waits until the end of the day to say, maybe he will make dua and then I will not record it. He is that merciful to us, to give us an opportunity. And even though he has unlimited power to do so, he will not take vengeance upon us. Well, if we as human beings become forbearing, that every way we see today people have relationship issues. So-and-so is angry with so-and-so. So-and-so doesn't like so-and-so. Because somebody has done this, whether it's somebody old, young, middle-aged, whatever it is, there is strife within the society, within families. Well, if we were to adopt that, the whole life is made up and composed of different relations. Being a brother or a sister, being a son or a daughter. And you know the most critical? I call it mil-dil. My sisters are hopefully listening to me. The idea of mil-dil, the tension that you have. Do you know what mil-dil is? It's mother-in-law and daughter-in-law syndrome. The idea is there is always that creative tension within the home. If we were to take the idea of Allah's forbearance and the concept of hilm that we are taught, then there will not be that strife to say, well, if Allah can forgive, and you know, Allah knows everything. We don't even know that much. And yet we get so angry for something someone has done for what we know. We don't even know what he has done behind us, and we only know what they have done in front of us. We know a little, and yet we get so angry. Allah knows everything about us, whatever we do, and yet he does not get angry. He gives us an opportunity to try and repair. He does not take revenge. If we are truly going to adopt the akhlaq of Allah within us and say that I too will have hilm within me, can you imagine how nice society would be? How many ills of a society would be cleared? This is an example of saying we change behavior through thinking, and ultimately we have to realize that the only relation that we have and the most important relation that we have is a relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we are nice to His creatures, be they our family or someone else, we're doing it for His pleasure, then Allah doesn't cut His relationship with us. He continues to give. He continues to forgive. He continues to give us risk. He continues to take care of us. He continues to keep His bond alive with us. And this is where we are told that one of the greatest sins is qat'a raham, to actually, tear yourself away from your family and your relatives. There has to be the concept of sila raham, that there must be a friendship, there must be relationships within families and not qat'a raham, that two mu'mineen should not be in a place where they do not speak to each other for more than 3 days. We have to forgive each other, we have to make it up, and we have to see that we are able to do this mu'mineen. Salawat. And I leave you with this last slide. Hilm is something that's forbearance. We as a community living in a wider society sometimes are very intolerant of other people. If somebody doesn't talk like us, somebody doesn't look like us, somebody doesn't share the faith like us, we suddenly become very intolerant. This is not the characteristic of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The idea of hilm and forbearance, when we say that tolerant by nature, that they may not be like you academically, they may not be like you religiously, or they may not be like you socio-economically. The idea is they are the creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have that hukukul ibad to see that we become tolerant. And we have to move from being just tolerant to actually have a level where we understand each other. There is an industry which is called Islamophobia. There are 5 think tanks or 5 funders, and there are 7 think tanks which actually are creating this industry of Islamophobia. What we are doing is sometimes we are actually helping them by becoming intolerant. If we act smartly, and if I were to present myself nicely to the people of other faiths, they will not believe the Islamophobia to say, but look, I work with a Muslim, he or she is such a nice person. How can you have that? So the whole idea is that if we are going to be living in a multicultural society, then we have to have this idea of hilm. And truly, we need to learn to think out of the box. Because Einstein said once that problems cannot be solved by thinking within the framework in which they were created. Salawat. Will somebody please control these kids? Salawat. So Einstein said that problems cannot be solved by thinking within the framework of where they were actually created. We have problems which are created because of interfaith relations, because of intrafaith relations. Our relations with the other faiths, our relations with our Sunni brothers and sisters. The idea is that the hilm that we have in us, we should be the standard bearers and the flag bearers of saying that we will take 2 steps. We cannot solve these problems by trying to be within our boxes. We have to first accept that we are in a box, and then we should try and get out of that box to say that the world requires, because there is a group like ISIS, which is everybody's enemy. We have a common enemy. The other Muslims are one side. This is the best opportunity that we have, where we move on the commonalities that we have, mu'mineen. Not harp on the differences. Yes, we will never forget history. We will never forget the incidents in history. Nobody is saying that we compromise on our beliefs. But the point is that these are our brethren in faith too. They too have said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah. And this kind of attitude which needs to germinate within the community needs to come. And our pulpits must be talking about this. Our pulpits may go and praise Mawlai Muttaqin, Imam Ali alayhi salam all we can. Mu'mineen, that is not going to solve our problems. Yes, we will praise Imam Ali alayhi salam. Yes, we will talk about his good qualities. And if we raise him to that level, we don't need to talk about anybody else. We can hold our own, we can convey a message. And this is the need of time. Salawat. Well, let me leave you with some good news. Imam Ali alayhi salam said that a man comes to the Blessed Prophet and he asks him to teach him an action that both Allah and the people would, number one, love him, his wealth would increase, his body would be healthy, his lifetime would last long, and he would be raised with him, meaning with the Blessed Prophet. He wanted it all in the 6 things. Don't we all want that? Absolutely, we all want that. So Mawla said, yes, you can get that. This 6 traits need 6 qualities. So now let's look at how do we get to this 6, that Allah would love us, our wealth would increase, the body would be healthy, the lifetime would be long, that would be raised with the Blessed Prophet. How? Well, he said, if you want Allah to love you, be afraid of Him and guard yourself against sin. If you want people to love you, be benevolent to them and decline what they have in their hands. Meaning don't take, give, which is what we have been talking about. Life is give and take. It is actually give and take. It's not that you give and I take. That doesn't mean give and take. The idea is that if you give, so if you are benevolent to them and decline what they have in their hands. And then if you want Allah to increase your wealth, then give alms, give zakat. And then if you want Allah to make your body healthy, then pay charity more frequently. Alms is one thing, zakat is one thing, khums is one thing. Charity does not mean khums and zakat, mu'mineen. Charity means that I give from the 80% that is left, not the 20% that belongs to the Imam. That is not your charity to do. That is the money of the Imam. What we have is that we pay charity from the 80%. So if you want Allah to make your body healthy, pay from the 80%. If you want Allah to prolong your lifetime, then have regard for your kinship. Don't have this qat'a raham. Don't say that I will not speak to my relative because I was cross with him. 3 days is enough. One of them has to go and say, let us forget and forgive. Let us move on because this is sila raham. This is what we have been told to say. If you want Allah to prolong your lifetime, then have regard for your kinship. And finally, if you want Allah to raise you with me, meaning the Blessed Prophet, then prolong your prostrations before Allah, the one and the dominator. Salawat. Mu'mineen, tonight we remember a young man in Karbala. This was a night of Ashur, and I want to recount a conversation that takes place between uncle and nephew. When Imam al-Islam was talking to the people, Janab Qasim asked to say that, will I also give my martyrdom? So firstly, Imam asks Hazrat Qasim to say, son, tell me, how do you find death? And the answer that he gives is recorded in Islamic history to say that he said, I find death sweeter than honey. And then when Imam Hussain al-Islam says, oh Qasim, yes, you too will give your life. And he said, even Ali Asghar will give his life. And Qasim was shocked to hear that, to say, will the enemies actually come into the tents? This was the cry of Janab Qasim. He got so worried to say, and Imam said, no, they will not come to the tents till we are alive. But oh Qasim, yes, they did come to the tents. And not only did they come to the tents, Mu'mineen, what they did on the Sham-e-Ghariba was to actually burn the tents. Mu'mineen, मैं अपनी मंजिल पे आ गया. आज याद करना है जनाब कासिम को, जब मोमिनीन जब सब अपनी जान दे चुके और ओनो मोहम्मद भी अपनी जान दे चुके, उसके बाद मोमिनीन खैमे से एक खूबसूरत नौजवान निकला जिसको अपनी माँ ने बड़ी ममता से पाला था. जी मैं नाम बता दूं, ये इमाम हसन अलैहिस्सलाम की तस्वीर, ये जनाब कासिम है. जनाब कासिम चचा के सामने आए. इमाम हुसैन ने दरियाफ्त किया कि कैसे आए. कहा चचा मुझे भी मरने की इजाजत दीजिए. कहा तेरे बाप ने तुझे मेरे हवाले किया था, तुझे मैंने बचपन से पाला है और मैं तुझे कैसे मरने की इजाजत दूं. ऐ कासिम, हुसैन के सीने में वो दिल कहां से लाए जो तेरा जनाजा उठाए. ऐ बेटा जिंदा रहो कि जब मैं दम तोड़ू तो तू मेरे सिरहाने आना. जनाब कासिम ने बहुत इसरार किया, मगर इमाम ने फरमाया कि मुमकिन नहीं कि चचा तुम्हें इजाजत दे. कासिम, जनाब कासिम मजबूर होकर खैमे में वापस आते हैं. आके मायूस बैठे, क्या करूं, चचा से कैसे इजाजत लूं. यकायक ये याद आता है कि बाबा ने एक तावीज बंधवाया था. दिल ने कहा कासिम वो तावीज खोलो जो बाबा ने बांधा था. जब तावीज खोला लिखा था, बेटा कासिम, ऐ बेटे कासिम, कल करबला में जब मेरा भाई दुश्मनों में गिर जाए तो तुम जान दे देना. खत लेके हुसैन की खिदमत में आते हैं. हुसैन ने कलेजे से लगाए और उसके बाद जनाब कासिम को तैयार किया. मोमिनीन सुन सकोगे, अरे घोड़ा आया. कासिम ने सवार होना चाहा लेकिन घोड़ा थोड़ा सा ऊंचा था. हजरत अब्बास से बढ़कर गोद में लिया, कासिम को घोड़े पे बिठलाया. अरे रकाबों में जो पैर डाले तो रकाबों तक पैर भी न पहुंचते थे. तस्मे काट कर रकाबें छोटी की गई. रकाबों में ढेर डाले, हाथ में घोड़े की लजाम ली और एक छोटी सी तलवार लेके मैदान जंग की तरफ चले. मगर कैसे, कुर्ता पहने हुए गिरेबान खुला, चमकता सीना सामने मैदान में आकर कासिम ने हैदरी आवाज से पूछा कि मैं हूँ हसन का फर्जंद. दुश्मन का लश्कर کہنے لگا کہ کربلا کے میدان میں قاسم آئے یا پھر صفین کے میدان میں علی آئے، بس مومنین میں سخت مصائب پڑھنے کا عادی نہیں، صرف اتنا کہ قاسم لڑے۔ ارے ایک نوجوان اتنی دھوپ میں 3 دن بھوکا پیاسا کتنا لڑتا۔ حیدری جلال نے حملے کے لیے بڑھا، ارے تلوار چمکی، وہ ایک سر پر پڑی، قاسم کا سر 2 ٹکڑے ہوا، قاسم سے سنبھالا نہ گیا، زمین پہ گرے۔ جب زمین پہ گرے تو آواز دی، چچا مدد کے لیے آئیے۔ قاتل نے چاہا کہ دوسری مرتبہ قاسم پر تلوار لگائے، حسین نے دیکھا، حسین امام حسین گھوڑے پر سوار للکارتے ہوئے بڑھے، ارے قاتل ٹھہر جا، میں آتا ہوں، اور اتنا تیز آئے حسین کہ عمر سعد اسدی کو نہ ہٹنے دیا، اس پہ جو تلوار چلائی اس کا ہاتھ کٹا، چیخنے لگا، دستے کو بلایا۔ بس اس بھاگ دوڑ میں مومنین آخری جملے کہ قاسم زمین پر زندگی میں کچھ لے جانے لگے، ادھر کے گھوڑے ادھر گئے اور قاسم تڑپ کر پکار رہے تھے، ارے چچا۔ جب غبار جنگ بیٹھا، لوگوں نے دیکھا کہ قاسم زندہ تو ہے مگر ٹکڑے ٹکڑے ایڑیاں رگڑ رہے ہیں، اور حسین جھکے ہوئے کہہ رہے ہیں، بیٹا چچا تجھے شرمندہ ہے، میری مدد تیرے کام آ نہ سکی۔ حسین لپٹ گئے، ارے میرے لال قاسم۔ مومنین قاسم کی کیسی حالت تھی کہ کیسے عرض کروں، ارے ذرا دل پر ہاتھ رکھ لو۔ جب اپنے بھتیجے کی لاش اٹھائی تو شہزادے کا سر آپ کے سر کے سر برابر تھا، سینے سے سینہ لگا ہوا تھا اور پاؤں زمین پر لٹک رہے تھے۔ ارے 13 سال کے بچے کی لاش اتنی دراز کیوں ہو گئی؟ سبب یہ تھا کہ گھوڑوں کی ٹاپوں سے آپ کا جسم مبارک ٹکڑے ٹکڑے ہوا۔ مومنین بس قتل گاہ سے خیمے تک لائے، میت لٹائی، سکینہ نکلی، ارے میت دیکھی، دوڑ کے خیمے میں گئی، ارے بھیا قاسم آ گئے، مگر جسم ٹکڑے ٹکڑے ہے۔ زینب نکلی، واہ قاسمہ، واہ علیہ، واہ محمدہ، پیچھے پیچھے روتی ماں نکلی، بیٹا تم نے مجھے سرخرو کر دیا، لال ماں تجھ پر نثار، اب تک تو میری کمائی تھی قاسم، آج تمہاری میت میرا سرمایہ بن گیا۔ انا للہ و انا الیہ راجعون، لعنت اللہ علی قوم الظالمین۔ ماتم حسین۔